Welcome! This video will introduce you to digital storytelling as a strategy for critical reflection. Then, we will discuss the attributes of an effective digital story and show you some examples to illustrate what we mean. Digital storytelling is an audio-visual reflection to document experiences and, most importantly, your learning as a result of your experiences. Within a 4 to 6 minute video, students will give a first-person narrative in sync with images that represent important words, concepts, and ideas from their written reflection. Music is added to the background of a digital story to evoke emotion and further illustrate meaning-making by setting a tone and overall feel to the story. Why is digital storytelling beneficial for students? First, digital storytelling fosters deep learning and causes students to think about their learning in a different way. The final product is an evidence of learning that also allows for students' creativity, personality, and voice to come through, which enables students to share their meaning-making in a clear and concise message. Digital storytelling is also a method to build upon students' 21st century skills, such as critical thinking and technology literacy. In addition, digital storytelling preps students for their professional career by helping them prepare for their elevator speech, as well as create a multimedia representation of learning that can be added to an e-portfolio, embedded in a cover letter, or added to application forms, such as graduate school applications. Now we will watch 2 examples of digital stories.
How does your first trip to the optometrist come about? Your eyes didn't seem to be working at what you think is their full potential. You've been squinting, trying to focus your fuzzy vision. The younger you are, the higher the chances that you didn't want to go, that you were forced to. Joining the Technologic TLC was a trip to the optometrist for me. Late in my high school career, I started to notice that my ideas and perceptions were fuzzy and abstract. When asked questions, I readily had images and feelings for answers, but I could never solidify or communicate those ideas. Because of this, I was uneasy. I was frustrated with my inability to articulate my opinions and ideas. I wanted to change, but I didn't know what the problem was. Little did I know, the TLC had all the tender loving care that I needed to sharpen my mental focus. Upon joining, I just thought that I would be reinforcing ideas I already had about life and my educational situation. I believed that abstract platitudes were as focused as the world got, and that to connect with my fellow humanity, I'd have to understand every confusing, elusive aspect of giant topics like relationships and communication. Even with my frustrations and misunderstanding, I was confident. I had become somewhat adept at grasping abstract and difficult ideas, even if the price was my ability to articulate those grasps. I felt that, as a new college student, I had most of what I needed to succeed. Friends and family told me that I would be fine, that I was bright. Consumerist society told me that I would be fine, as long as I had the latest product. And I believed all these. As much as I now hate to admit it, I rarely question the reliability of my sources. At the beginning of my TLC learning journey, I was just a young idealist with broken and tangible ideas of how the world worked. You could think of me as a dysfunctional camera. I had everything I needed to work, except for the lens. Without that, I couldn't take the information that I received and use it to make a coherent picture, to apply my knowledge to my situations. But through my TLC classes, things began to change. I was challenged to read the ideas of people like Burke, Foucault, and Turkle. I started to notice things that bothered me. Trouble in paradise, one teacher would say. And then my mind drifts to the phrase, ignorance is bliss. Things began to make sense. Before, I had no clear idea of the nature of my problem, but now these ideas seem to tie together with such beautifully defined ropes. I thought I needed to understand how every person's mind worked in order to connect with them. But Burke thought otherwise. He called literature equipment for living. Understanding that, I realized that I could totally apply generalized situations from literature to my own interactions. It was as if my teacher, or doctor, turned a dial so that I could see Burke's thinking. Is it clearer now? Another blurred platitude I had was that people have an inherent sense of power amongst themselves, that people are drawn to charisma without realizing it, The people just floated in and out of power based on cosmic whims. I couldn't explain why I, like so many other people, felt pressured to identify with certain political groups because my family or friends did. I couldn't explain why I felt like I was being judged. But Foucault could. Once I was introduced to panopticism, that feeling was put into words. Dense ones, mind you, but ones I could understand. I understood the paranoia, why it was there, how it worked. Dare I say, I understand it clearly. It's as if another dial was turned, so now I see a chart of Foucault's ideas on the wall next to Burke's. Even clearer now, huh? Sorry, I got distracted. Sharpening my focus on these issues, I began questioning more. How does all this relate to technology? Turkle explained that one. I hadn't thought about it before, but video games provide huge opportunities for control. Consoles today are sold with claims that they're more social than ever, when in reality, a player is left to sit at home and talk to real friends over a headset. Couch co-op, being physically with your friends to play, is becoming obsolete. And now another dial is turned. My vision is even sharper. Through the TLC, I've learned to really see the bonds that tie all these ideas together. With the educational lenses I've been given through this TLC, I feel that I can look to the future now with a clear mental eye. Because my discerning eye is new and underdeveloped, I feel like I have something to look forward to. I have room to grow.
As I made my way into Beech Grove Meadows nursing home, I expected to find a match to my preconceptions. I had walked these halls before, walked past room after room with no eye contact. But today would be different. I was finally going to stop, to listen, and to engage. I spoke to 4 residents at length about their story. How they lived, their visitors, their family, the medical reasons they were here, and their feelings now. The first resident I spoke with was Mrs. Riddell, 68 years old and stricken with advanced Parkinson's disease. She's mostly paralyzed and doesn't know how long she's been in the nursing home. Her only visitor comes on Tuesdays. She spent years on a farm, raising and caring for horses, even owned one herself. Then she was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and things began to turn. Soon she had to sell her horse and became unable to care for herself. Memories hazy. She tells me she knows she'll be here the rest of her life. But her nurse has become like family. She helped type a letter to one of Mrs. Riddell's old and lost friends. Mrs. Riddell said it meant a lot to her because she wanted to write to this friend before she died. When her nurse Connie was in the room, I saw Mrs. Riddell's true smile. It was a big smile, a bit of happiness I found that I didn't expect. Connie may be her nurse, but Connie was also a friend. Next, I met Kenny St. John. 64 years old, he spent the majority of his adult life as a race car driver. Mr. St. John drove stock cars all over the region. One title gained him a $25,000 prize. Then, 2 years ago, he suffered a hemorrhagic stroke that left him unable to care for himself. Kenny's wife visits him 2 or 3 times a week, and he remembers everything, including the name of his favorite nurse, Tammy. He says that she has become part of his family. His eyes lit up when she came into the room, and they joked with each other as they posed for this picture. Tammy was more than a nurse. She was a friend, and the role of healthcare workers broadened for me once again. Then I met John Behringer, 92 and a veteran who served in the Army Air Corps as a turret gunner and flight engineer in both World War II and the Korean War. John had 2 children, but adopted 3 others and raised them all with his wife. Sadly, his wife succumbed to dementia and she moved into the nursing home. John moved into the nursing home to be with his wife. Then, over the period of 1 year, John endured the passing of his wife, 2 of his daughters, and his son. It was then he told me that he knew he was there to die, but said his attitude was more important. He told me his philosophy is more smiling, less griping, and coming from him, that really means something. John does have visitors, but his family also includes his nurse, Monique. He lit up with a tear-filled smile when he talked about her. She calls him Mr. B and dances with him. She was not there on my initial visit, so I returned to get a picture of them together. When I returned, I found Monique dancing with Mr. B. It was joyous, and the special role of healthcare workers was highlighted for me once again. Next, I visited Catherine, 56 years old and stricken with multiple sclerosis. She is wheelchair-bound, and the disease has severely affected her cognitive ability. She tells the nursing staff that she hasn't seen her son in years, even though they all know he does visit. Catherine knows little about the outside world. I met her once when I was 2. I met her again when I was 17, and then once again when I was 33. It was then that I found her suffering from a new diagnosis of MS. She lived with her parents, but they were elderly, and she was a burden to them. Wanting to do right, I moved her from her elderly parents' home and into a government-subsidized apartment to try to give her her life back. I set up a bank account, got Meals on Wheels to deliver her food, and the free hover-round wheelchair so that she could get around. Then one day the apartment complex called and said that she kept falling. The apartment was a terrible mess. I talked to Catherine and she told me it was 1989, even though it was 2008. Her doctor asked if I could find a new home for her. My search led me to Beech Grove Meadows, where I volunteered today. I am glad to see the nursing staff take such good care of her, because Catherine is my biological mother. I can't say I ever really knew her. I only carry an unfillable void where our relationship should exist. She spent her life selfishly burning every bridge she ever crossed, partying and not caring, no plans for the future, not a mother to her son. She traveled the country, drinking, drugs, and led a life that had no attachment. But I want what is best for her. I often tell myself I should visit even more, but I just can't. It stirs up unresolvable emotions that are not pleasant, and she just doesn't understand. It's natural and innocent to pass judgment on the faceless who do not visit their residence, but knowing my personal story, I do not judge those who don't visit, for who knows where they've come. For me, this experience shines a brilliant light on the expanded role of healthcare workers. I never realized how much of a difference we could make. During this experience, I learned a new role of healthcare workers beyond the science. Patient care, yes, but being a friend is every bit as important. And as we embark on a journey to be healthcare workers ourselves, I ask you not to forget that these patients are people. People with stories, hearts, and feelings. And in the mad rush to increase efficiency and get the x-rays done quickly, take the time. Because you may be all they have, and that is so much.
The first video has many merits. First, the storyteller has used appropriate voice, like pacing and inflection, that provide cues that indicate to the listener there is an important idea, and demonstrates meaning making that, unlike written reflection, allows the storyteller to strongly influence how their story is heard and interpreted. In addition, the storyteller has used appropriate images that showed he was thoughtful and attentive to the storyboarding process, which is discussed in more detail in Module 2. The storyteller also utilized critical thinking skills by choosing images that visually illustrate how he made sense of key words, phrases, and ideas. For example, when he says, "People have an inherent sense of power amongst themselves, that people are drawn to charisma without even realizing it," he connected that to what the Pied Piper stands for and represents. This example also has appropriate music that matches the tone of the narrative, as well as smooth transitions. Overall, this digital story is an excellent demonstration of student learning, which is even further supported by his telling of what he has yet to learn and how he is trying to make sense of that. This digital story's merits include the storyteller's use of tone. The narration was filled with emotion that was appropriate and aligned with the storyteller's reflection. While we credit the student for this, we must also warn you, be cautious when using emotions as the central focal point of your story. Oftentimes, students who focus too much on emotions struggle to really tell us about their learning and meaning making, which happened a bit in this story. Emotions can be powerful when communicated well, but we aren't evaluating students on their emotions. Digital stories, while great for their ability to give students creative freedom, may take students down a path that is less academic and detract from their ability to illustrate learning. Overall, this was an excellent story. We use this example to point out the importance of writing a good script. Oftentimes, students who are asked to create a digital story get hung up on the final product and don't focus their attention on writing a good story. Every great digital story starts with a good script, so don't underestimate the time and effort required to write. And keep in mind all the aspects that make for a good story: a strong theme, purpose, a strong beginning, middle, end, plot, characters, and more. This digital story could be improved. For example, the storyteller used images that had text. Although the images coincided with his narrative, it is important to choose images that are not distracting to the listener. When we see text, our eyes will immediately jump to that first. That may not be what you want your viewer to do. A few general guidelines or recommendations for when to include text on images include the following. When you are giving a statistic or showing graphs or charts. When showing an image of an important person and you don't state that person's name in your narrative. Or when you want your audience to read something specific, like a quote, but you won't state the exact quote in your narrative, and instead, the narrative is your interpretation of what the quote means. Another critique of this digital story is that the storyteller had heartfelt commentary about his experiences, but he did not illustrate much evidence of learning other than his perception of what it means to be a healthcare worker. A digital story should not seem like a call to action or an advertisement for a cause, but rather an illustration of learning. Your instructor is not asking you to make a video that they will post on the school's website to convince students to attend IUPUI. That is not the purpose of this. Instead, tell us what you have learned, how you learned it, what you will do differently in light of this learning, and what you have still yet to learn. Digital storytelling is a process that allows the storyteller to communicate how he or she has critically examined their knowledge and assumptions. What makes a great digital story? Digital stories must have an overall purpose that demonstrates an evidence of learning. A great digital story will demonstrate knowledge by showing us how they know what they know, using concrete examples and experiences, and also tell us what they have yet to learn. Using a theme, such as an extended metaphor or quote, reinforces a digital story's purpose and quickly enables the viewer to understand how you made sense of your reflection. In addition, careful attention is given to the pace and clarity of voice in the first-person narration. Additionally, the music in the background should not overpower the narration. Appropriate selection of images further communicates meaning making. The images should represent the words, concepts, and ideas that the student highlighted in the storyboarding process.